Okay, good evening. I welcome you all. My name is Simon Jacobson. Since I see a few new faces, I specifically welcome you. Even though I like to believe, and I do believe, that each of us have a new face every week, or every day, every moment actually. As they say that, as King Solomon writes, that generation comes and a generation goes and there's nothing new under the sun, which of course is a very depressing thought. But what's new? Ecclesiastes is a depressing book for that matter. But when you read the verse properly, you understand, like any good writer, any good poet, there's two sides to every story. So though on one end, it sounds so depressing that nothing changes, but on the other end, he specifically says, under the sun, nothing is new. But above the sun, there's much new. So our challenge, and our choice really, any moment in our lives, is will we choose the mediocrity and the monotony of life under the sun, where things don't change, or as the cynics say, the more things change, the more they stay the same? Or do we choose to transcend earth in a certain way, to transcend our physical and immediate needs and temptations, instant gratification, distractions, to rise a bit above the sun, and that's where there is much newness. So I'd like to believe that this class is coming together. We, after a long, hard week, or a hard day, each of us consumed or overwhelmed by our responsibilities and commitments and some of the, we'll call it, harshness of this physical world, find this place, find our space here and our environment right now as somewhat of a spiritual oasis where we can transcend and go up above the sun, at least for a little while, and then when we return back to earth, to bring that energy into our day tomorrow and the rest of the week. So that would be a nice goal, wouldn't you say? And since that's my responsibility to try to live up to this objective, I shall try to do that. So with that short introduction, let me say, I try to focus on every week on something timely, usually connected either with the Jewish calendar, as I've so many times emphasized here, that the calendar is not just a calendar, it's really a flow of energy. And it's getting aligned with that energy that really helps us transcend our challenges and grow and go to a higher place. So yeah, there's two ways to solve a problem. One way is to tackle it head on. Here's the problem, try to fix it. And another way is called transcending the problem, which is by far a greater and superior approach. Think of it this way. Just as a small example. So a little kid came over to you right now, physical small child, and start kicking you or yelling at you. So I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that none of you would get down on your hands and feet and start kicking back and scratching and biting. I know that's not always the case, but we would assume that. Why? Because you don't see this child as insulting. A little child. The child is angry. The child is upset, whatever. But if an adult came over to you and insulted you, someone that you could see as a peer, as an equal, then you usually will reciprocate. However, when we grow intellectually and we grow spiritually, we learn not to reciprocate even to adults around us, because in a way, when people behave childishly, they don't have to be 2 years old. You can be 30 years old and also be a child. I'm sure you've met such people. I hope you were never in that state, but we all end up sometimes regressing to that type of place when we have anger or other things that push our buttons and you suddenly lose control. So the real approach, the healthy approach, Obviously, short term, you do whatever it takes to control yourself. But the real approach is to teach a person to broaden their horizons. So when things happen to you, they just don't bother you anymore. Can you imagine that? So it's one thing is to train somebody, even though something's bothering you, don't act on it. Another is to go completely take the high road where the thing doesn't bother you at all. That's called real growth. So if you want to know if you've grown psychologically, and if therapy is working, try that litmus test. Are you actually looking at the challenges that you had last year differently, but they don't bother you anymore? And then you look back, it's almost funny, that which was so tragic, that you were able to come to a place like that. But that is really called broadening your horizons, where you see bigger, you look for bigger goals, and you set your sights on higher objectives, so then the little more petty things simply don't matter that much. So just like we wouldn't get down on our hands and knees and start kicking, scratching, and biting a child because it's not in our league, also as adults, there's plenty of growth that we can achieve, that we should also see things that seemingly bothered us so much, not as so significant. But to achieve that, you have to have an alternative. If all you ever saw in your life to achieve happiness were petty things or short-term things, then that's where you're invested in the success. It's when you begin to recognize there are other values and you begin to touch them, you suddenly realize that everything else pales in comparison. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to have happiness all around and across the board, but it's putting things into context. What is important and what's not that important. Now we live in a spoiled world. We are spoiled. Despite what people say about the economy, even with the worst economy, we're spoiled relative to generations before us. So in our time and age, it's even more critical to have that bird's eye view. So this isn't just an introduction. This is actually what I was saying. I try to focus on something timely, something that is connected to the time we're in, which is a flow of energy. And it's often we touch upon something in the weekly portion of the Torah, or the calendar, like last week, the 15th of Av, the full moon, or the week before Tisha B'Av. And thank God the Jewish tradition and calendar and Torah have plenty to uncover. The hafach the kula ba, you can turn it, and there's always more. So this week we'll focus on, and that's no pun intended, on focus. So this week's chapter in the Torah is actually called C, Re'eh, the fourth chapter in the book of Deuteronomy, the last of the 5 books. These weeks are also known as the 7 weeks of comfort, following the 3 weeks of affliction. They're not leaving, by the way, because of anything I said. They told me they had to go earlier, so it's important to state that. Really? They heard affliction and they ran, right? Yeah. So the 4th week, and it's the weeks also that prepare us, in a sense, we're beginning to enter into the preparatory stage before the high holiday season. I know nobody wants to think about that yet, so if you want to strike that from the record, fine. So we'll stick to we're still in the summer. So the portion begins with a name, Re'eh, which is the first word of this chapter. Often the names are either the first word or one of the first few words. But the power of a name is significant, including our personal names, which is why when you ask for a prayer, or God forbid someone's ill, you mention the Hebrew name, mother's name. It's because name, as the mystics put it, is the channel through which your soul enters into your body. So think of the soul, for instance, let's say a projected light, which is just white light on the screen, and if you put carved letters between the projector and the screen, so you'll get the same light, but the light will come in the shape of the letters. So the light is just being channeled through the letters. So our Hebrew names have that type of power. So a name carries intensity and can touch a person's soul in a very deep place. And the same is true with the name of a chapter. So Re'eh has its own meaning, just the word itself. Now the context of the verse is that God is basically speaking through Moses and saying, Re'ei anechi nesen lefnechem hayem, bracha v'klala. Behold. Re'ei can also be translated as behold. Literally means to see in Hebrew, but to see, behold. I endow you today with a blessing and a curse. That's the meaning of the first verse. So the theme of this evening will be about vision and about beholding, what it really means. But I want to just a moment elaborate on this verse, and then we'll go back to the general concept of vision. The question is asked, in Hebrew every word is precise. Hebrew is a metaphorical language as opposed to, for instance, English or Latin languages that are descriptive languages, meaning that every Hebrew word has many, many layers of meanings. In English, a word means one thing, and that's it. I mean, it could allude to other things, but words are very descriptive and so on. That's why, just as a tangentially speaking, to translate a sentence in Hebrew usually takes 3 sentences in English and 5 sentences in French, just for the record. That's not meant to be any racism in that sentence. So Hebrew words are very metaphorical. So the words Rei Anochi Noisim, when you say Noisim, is an interesting choice of word. The Noisim means to give, to present, to bequeath, endow, bestow, all the synonyms. But Noisim in the Talmud, it says, whenever it says the word Noisim, it says Kol HaNoisim B'ayin Yofer Noisim. Whenever it uses the word Noisim to give, it means giving in a pleasant manner, like a gift. A matana. In Hebrew, the word for gift is a matana. Matana means a giving. It's a giving, a gift. So the question is, what kind of gift is this? It's one thing to say, behold, I give you today a gift of blessing. But the next word in the verse, the last word in the verse, is also a curse. Where's the blessing and the gift of a curse? Where's the gift of the curse? And the answer is also very obvious, that the greatest gift you can give a person is really a double gift. It's to telling them not only what path to go on, but also what path not to go on. So you in the middle of your life, or whatever part of your life, are traveling and trying to look for direction, and you meet a wise person. So sometimes that wise person may tell you this is the way to go. And sometimes the wisdom will be this is the way not to go. Which is a greater gift? They're equally gift. Because we can waste the rest of our lives going on the wrong direction, going the wrong road. And that waste of time is a tragedy. So by telling someone preventing you and telling you, don't go down this road, I've been there, or you won't find what you're looking for, is just a gift, it's just a great gift as someone telling you this is the road to go on. So the Torah is telling us here in one verse, the vision of life. Re'ei, behold, that there are 2 paths, and we will tell you both paths. This is the path of blessing, and this is the path of the opposite of blessing, of curse. Curse here doesn't mean a curse. If you do this, you'll be cursed. That's a stereotype around the Torah. Anyone that knows Hebrew and knows how to read the Torah, even literally, understands the words curse and blessing in the Torah as reward and punishment are really not translated properly. As I said, translations are more than just a word. You want to translate schar and oynish, or bracha and klola. The real translation, as the Shalosh says, of reward and punishment actually is cause and effect. Think of the difference of reward and punishment and cause and effect. When you put your hand in fire, it's not that the fire or nature is punishing you for putting your hand in fire. It's cause and effect. There are rules that existence is governed by. Cause and effect. The same thing in the Torah when it tells you, you do this and you'll live long and be healthy and happy. You do that and you'll be miserable. So most people translate that as a curse, which of course goes into the whole stereotype of religion in general and God being angry and vengeful and getting even with us, which is the images that most people have about religion. When in truth, it's cause and effect. It's a blessing telling us that existence has its rules. Life has its rules. When you hurt another person, you're not just hurting that person, you're also hurting yourself. You may not see it. You may not feel it. But being that we're all one integral unit, so think of it one large body. If you touch one toenail, the rest of the body is also being hurt, whether you feel it or not. So in other words, it's a blessing to tell us what to do and what not to do. So you take an operator's manual for any of these new gadgets you buy these days, or any day. So today, of course, with all the liabilities and lawsuits, every operator's manual looks almost like a bottle of cyanide, with all these warning signals, and then the skulls and so on. That if you do this, you think it's because they have to warn you with all these pictures. So you have in every operator's manual what to do to make your computer work and what not to do. The Torah essentially is the life's operator's manual. So the gift, Nisan, I give before you today a gift. And the gift is the gift of the path upon which to travel and the path which is not worth traveling on. And both are a blessing because, as I said, knowing where to spend your time is a blessing, and also knowing where not to waste your time is also a blessing. I would even say that in our lives, sometimes it's better if someone would have told me, if you had a choice, tell me where not to go, even more important than where to go. Because then, at least I know where not to get hurt. And then I'll find by process of elimination where to find the direction. So that's the gift. So now to get to the vision part, to the A. And it's a very, almost an obvious question, but it only takes, like anything that's obvious, a little attention on our part. Because the interesting thing is, as I often mention here, truth is not owned by anybody. And therefore no one can sell it to you. Truth is inside each of us, inside of our souls. The problem is that we have many distractions that so-called block out and don't allow ourselves to access our own inner truth. And that's when we need help, often, for someone to help cut away the weeds, get rid of the distractions, so the truth can emerge. And that's called resonance. When you hear a song and it touches you, you don't need anyone to teach you how it should touch you. You just need to listen. But because we're so overwhelmed with so much of our lives, it's very difficult to find the patience and the time to listen. But when we do, certain obvious truths jump out at us, and we could even bang yourself in your head and say, how come I don't notice it? And the interesting thing is, even after you hear it, you go back down to earth, so to speak, you forget it as if you never heard it. That's the weird, we human beings are strange people. So I remember once in this class, at the end of the class there was people hung around and there was a discussion. And some people shared what they did. One person said he's an obstetrician by profession. He delivers children, works in the New York hospital. What is it, the 9th floor? I think so. And someone asked him, just like nonchalantly, how did he choose this line of work, or why does he enjoy this work? Not that it's a blessing to bring children into the world, but the way he answered was very striking, and I'll never forget it. He said that often he delivers a baby in the delivery room, and it's the middle of the day, and you could hear the rush hour outside. This is right over the FDR, and you hear the cars rushing and the horns honking. And sometimes he delivers a child in the middle of the night, where it's quieter. But often in the middle of the rush hour, he thinks to himself, that's the way the doctor described it, like, where are people rushing to? People are rushing home rushing home from work. Some people are rushing to a show. Most people are rushing just to rush. An end in itself. And here up in the delivery room, in the quiet of a room, you have no bumper-to-bumper traffic. The mother, attending nurse, one or two people. And this quiet, the greatest miracle of all is taking place. The miracle of our beginnings. The beginning. Our birth. Each of us was born. And it brings him to tears, the contrast of how the world is so busy with their preoccupations. And here he has the blessing and the gift to be able to see things in perspective. the birth, the miracle of birth. So I remember that night, I drove home on the FDR after this class. I wanted to feel the experience. So usually at night in New York, this is construction, so of course there was a traffic jam. And I saw some tempers flaring around me, road rage, which is, they say, one of the healthy ways people vent or their childhood repression. That's a joke. I'm not suggesting that as a catharsis. And I thought about what he said, and I remembered what the Baal Shem Tov says, that the difference between a miracle and a natural occurrence, listen to this, a miracle and a natural event, is not that a miracle is the supernatural thing that happens. The sea splits in the middle of He says the difference between a miracle and a natural event is one word. It's frequency. Frequency. If the sun were to rise once in our lifetimes, we'd all come out with our children and with camera crews and photographers. Look at this beautiful ball rising in the horizon. But since the sun rises every morning, it becomes something we're accustomed to. And we need a new novelty, a new high. And that's what makes it a miracle. It's novelty. So essentially nature, as the Chacham Tzvi writes, nature is a bunch of perpetual miracles happening so fast and so often that we don't even notice. Now think about that. So a miracle is really seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary and the supernatural within the natural. But this takes perspective. All of us can appreciate this. You don't need to be brilliant or philosopher. It says in Medrash, on the last verse in Psalms, Kol neshama neshama tahalel ka. Every soul and soul praises God. What's the repetition of the word soul, neshama, neshama? So the Medrash says, Medrash Tehillim, the Medrash on Psalms, the neshama can also be read and also means breath. Neshima, neshima, breath and soul in Hebrew are the same word. God breathed into the human being a soul. It's a breath. That's why breath is connected to spirit, and it's often used in spiritual healing and so on. So kol neshima, neshima, on every breath, not only one breath, but every breath you take, and long before the police made that line popular, the Medrash Tehillim said, every breath you take, you praise God. But we don't appreciate it because we breathe so often and it comes so easily. But God forbid, go into a hospital and see someone struggling for breath. And you suddenly wonder, why am I not struggling? And you don't need to be a doctor to know what are the factors that are necessary that breathing should be smooth. You'd be shocked of how many factors have to work together to make it that way. And we breathe for 80, 90, 100, 110 years of our lives. How many breaths did we take? Anyone here ever figure that out? You can Google it, let me know. And every breath is a miracle, except it happens so often and so many of us. And interestingly, even when we do see someone struggle, at that moment we remember it's a miracle, but it doesn't last very long. So what's this strange thing, this paradox in human nature? That when you are forced to pay attention, suddenly you realize deeper truths. And then you go back to your life and you forget. What is this? What's the matter with us? That's why we need constant reminders. You could say signposts in our lives. And as many as we have, it's never enough. Because the tentacles of material reality are so powerful that even when you think you're inspired, don't take it for granted. Because while you're being inspired, it's dissipating already before you even know it. And that type of I'll call it arrogance, cockiness, or self-confidence that, I've been inspired, is our biggest undoing. This world is a trap. And if you're not vigilant and constantly waking yourself up, it's not a passive world. It looks passive, but it conceals inner truths all the time in a very aggressive way. But its aggression is so powerful that we don't see it. It's the way the mystics put it. So it's a constant effort to remember certain truths in life. And it's very easy to gravitate right back to survival mode. Which brings me to the concept of vision. When it comes to business, everybody understands there's no such thing as a business without a mission statement. Or some call a vision statement even before a mission statement. Because if you don't have a vision, you don't have a mission, what's going to keep everything aligned? All your activities, all your projects, all your employees. Even with missions, how many companies lose direction? For whatever reason. Maliciously or not maliciously or due to just laziness. You need constant vigilance to keep things aligned, especially when you have more than one person working there. People have different agendas. People didn't understand their instructions, etc., etc. So then ask yourself one simple question. If a business cannot function without a mission or a vision, how can you and I? And what's your vision statement? I don't like to put anybody on the spot, but I've asked many people this question. And nobody likes to admit they don't have one. So they come up with all kinds of interesting answers. Innovative. Like, my vision? Of course I have a vision. I've thought it through. Yeah, really? Okay, like, first of all, how many years did you give it thought? Like, what age exactly? By the time you're thrown into the world trying to make a living, you have no time to think about it. So when exactly did you give it thought? Between college and a job? And I'm not saying this to be critical. We have to just put it brutally honest. And second of all, when you did give it thought, so what conclusions did you come to? And I'll tell you, this is not a scientific study, but I can tell you the results that I picked up, talking to all types of people, and not in a challenging, in a very kind and calm environment, asking this question. And the answer most people say, my vision, to be happy. That's very popular. To build a healthy family. Have a lot of money so I can do whatever I want. To be free. Serving other people. And then there's different answers, of course. But really all, frankly, are platitudes. Because let's apply that same answer to the business model. To say, for instance, that a mission or vision of a business is to make money, which is the equivalent of saying to be happy, is not a mission statement. Every business is supposed to make money. Not all are, but they're supposed to be. The question is, how are you going to make it? It's different than someone else will. So happiness is a very nice term. We all would love to be happy. That's not a vision or a mission. That's a wish. That's maybe the end result. But what do you have and what are you dedicating your life that will achieve happiness? So then the answer, of course, is if I had enough money, that will make me happy. I'm not here to rebut every one of these. You can do it on your own. The point that I'm making here is that most of us don't have a real answer. You know why? Not because we're bad people, but because, like the story of the Baal Shem Tov, we were never forced to pay attention to this question. No one ever compelled us to. And even when we do, what tools do we have? Someone say, okay, so tell me, what is happiness exactly? That's a very good question. So when you're 20 years old, you have one version of it. By the time you fell out of love and been hurt a few times, you have a different answer. Some people, happiness is at least not being miserable is already happiness. That's what some people tell me. I've discovered that happiness is if I'm not miserable, I'm happy. That's like peace is the absence of war. Love is the absence of hate. That means a person who's lowered their so-called standards, basically. But I'm here to tell you this evening, to myself and to you, that we read this chapter, even though it's been read thousands of times before. To be specific, actually 3,321 times since the time of Moses. Not that much. And it's an opportunity, when you read it, is to revisit this topic. To firstly be honest and acknowledge whether you do or don't have a mission or vision, and more importantly, once you acknowledge it, to start looking for one. And it's completely achievable if you want to set your mind to it, and you will not go into denial of convincing yourself that the details of your life are your vision. The truth is, whether we like it or not, for most of us, who's controlling our lives is not a vision. It's the details and the demands of the moment. If you have to pay your bills, that is going to control your life tomorrow. Whether you like it or not. I'm not saying we like it. I'm not saying we're happy with it. Because there are realities on the ground that simply take up so much time and energy. to the extent that some people say, what are you talking to me about vision? I can't even pay my bill this week. Who has time to talk about vision? And it's a good question. But the fact is there are short-term solutions and long-term ones. If you don't start somewhere, the details of your life will never go away. Just because you pay your bills, there'll be other details. Because if it's not that, there's another set of details. For example, finding a good, healthy relationship. And if it's not that, there's other things. The list goes on. You can go the whole list of all the things that wear us down, including our psychological pasts and our childhoods and so on. So exactly who has time in this world to find a vision? Only those that quit their jobs or have all the money in the world? I know many people with all the money in the world, and they have the most difficult people to find the vision because the money is destroying them. So exactly how do you get out of this trap? Well, there's only one simple way. No excuses, period. Zero excuses. Either you're going to have a vision in your life and you start now, or you're not going to have one. As simple as that. If you're going to push it off for another month, now, I'm not saying this is a threat, because you don't have to answer to me. You're not getting credits for this class. Right? I'm saying it as a friend to myself and to yourself. I know from my own life, you have to make the move. And if you don't make the move, all the talk is worthless. And the move is going to cost a price, yes. But the dividends in return are far more that you give up. Because it becomes, are you addicted and trapped to your details or not? So let's just talk a moment about the difference between a vision and no vision. So poetically and romantically and conceptually, everyone likes the idea of thinking, I have the bird's eye view, right? Bird's eye view of life. However, it's easy to talk about it when you read a book or you read an article and someone gives you the panorama of history. I know, for instance, when I give a lecture about the clash of civilizations, as some call it, in the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish world, and you trace its roots to the biblical stories of Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau, it's very fascinating how the dots are connected and you suddenly see the big picture. And in general, even if you're not a history buff, there's a certain beauty, a certain elegance when you see how things have evolved. You see a picture emerging. You know? And we're all drawn to it, as a matter of fact. The interesting twist is that when it comes to your own life, it's very difficult to do that because you're in the middle of the merry-go-round right now. You're on the roller coaster. How can you be in it at the same time look at it from above? Well, that's what this Re'eh says in this beginning of this chapter, behold. And this word behold is used many, many times in the Bible, in the Torah. You hear behold. You even take it for granted. But step a moment and think what the word behold means when God says to Abraham, behold. Or to Moses, behold. He's saying basically, don't get trapped in the moment. Behold, I show you the picture. Abraham is shown a vision of what the future of history would be like. Moses is shown from the mountain before he passes away, the whole of Israel. These are not just sightseeing experiences. These are visions that put things into context and perspective. Now it's true, not everybody necessarily is a born visionary. But this chapter actually says that each of us does have a visionary within us if you allow it to emerge. And it comes down to a little hard work, and the hard work really entails, I'm going to call hard work, say more meticulous work, entails of looking at your life at today, at yesterday, and separating between the means and the end. If you were to list everything you did today, you'll come up with around 100 and 150 items. And I mean everything, every detail. I'm saying for yourself, you don't have to share it with others. And that comes up from the moment you're awake, till you're exercising, or guilty over not exercising, or snooze button and how many times you hit it, showering, getting dressed, breakfast, coffee break, tea breaks, commuting, work, what you read, what you didn't read, who you met, business meetings, significant things, wasting time, evening, the list goes on. You list them all as independent, a very simple listing of every individual thing. And then try this experiment. Try to draw a thread with a pen, actually, between these items and see how many fit under the same category. How many lead one to the next. How many are connected? So yeah, commuting can be connected to your work because you can't get to work without commuting. You'll find that most of the elements are fragmented. and have no connection to each other. So you could think, okay, big thing, so what? Well, here's so what. So what? It's nothing. If one day you have 150 fragments, okay. But then day after day, and week after week, and month after month, and then what comes after month? Year after year. Who's counting, right? And decade after decade, and then there's a century after century. Now we also went through a new millennium. How many details, how many fragments do you have now? Millions, tens of millions of fragments. If you don't think that affects you and your spirit and your psyche, you're gravely mistaken. We're disturbed even when we have 2 fragments in our lives. Human beings, even the most disorganized, abhor disorganization. I've talked to many disorganized people that we would call disorganized. And they think they're organized. They have just their organization. It works only for them. I remember somebody who had a desk that the papers all the way almost to the ceiling. And I could not fathom it. And when I asked him, how do you find anything? He says, tell me, what are you looking for? I answered him, he knew exactly where it was. He had a certain art to be able to pull it out and not have everything spill over. I asked him, does it ever spill over? Once in a while. Now, obviously, this is a certain type, but my point being, all of us look for some order. The question is what order is and what the shortcuts are. Some of us have it figured out and we know the shortcuts and it's really orderly. And some don't. They say one thing on your desk at a time. You're not going to find many people who can do that, but there are those that do. And then, of course, there's that other sign that says that if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, what is an empty desk a sign of? But bottom line is that human beings, by nature, look for order. So imagine what is happening, how kind of erosion is going on internally when you're constantly, and the years accumulate and the details accumulate. The difference is why in business we don't tolerate a business without a mission statement is very simple. Because it's called accountability, and it's called the bottom line, and they're called debtors. And if you're not going to be efficient, someone's going to pay the bill. They're going to come knocking at your door. In our personal lives, there are no creditors and no debtors. Who's going to call upon us? It's a personal matter. What happens is instead of exploding, it implodes. This is essentially, if you want to call it a diagnostic description of lack of vision, this is what it is. And it's a story of most of our lives. Not because we're intentionally that way, it's because we get trapped in life. And the details take over, and that's it. They're directing our lives. God forbid, the only thing that changes often is when there's some loss or tragedy, then suddenly you stop. You have to stop. And then there is usually a wake-up call. If it lasts is the question, but there is a wake-up call. It just shows you that even though it makes so much sense that we should be driven by vision, how many of us actually are. So if you're really committed to finding it, I'll share with you a few key points that are necessary to get to a place like that. I don't think I have to make a stronger case. I made the case already, and if it wasn't strong enough, I don't know what I can add to it. The need for it. The question, of course, is then, okay, if there's a need, so how do we get there? And we're not talking about something unrealistic that's only take a sabbatical and travel to Israel or some mountain and then spend time searching for a vision. It may not even help anyway. It could be an escape, but it may not help you find it. The question is also how to do it realistically with the life that we have and where we are right now. And there's no question that it's doable because, as I said, we read it this week's chapter, and we have a rule, an axiom. When Moses asks God, how can the Jewish people build a temple for you? You're the divine, you're infinite, you're beyond infinite. How can a physical structure contain you? And God answers, Eini mevakesh lefikechi el lefikechon. Unbelievable response. God says, I would not ask them to do something that only I can do. I ask them something only that which they can do. In other words, there's no request made of us ever in life. No challenge that we're given that we cannot handle. Not only is that an insight, it's also what we call a nesinas koyach. It's empowerment to know that. That if you're sent on a mission, and you have one, there's no way that you cannot find that mission if you want to. It's not something that requires a miracle or requires some type of supernatural intervention. So when we're told that, hey, behold, see, this is the blessing, this is your path, and this is the path not to take, as I discussed earlier, means that we have the capacity if we set our minds to it. So how do we do it in this busy life that we live? So of course the most important question of all is, what is the vision? What are we looking for? If the word happiness is not really the answer, and money is not the answer, and even saying building a healthy family, which I mentioned, why is that not the answer? Because that too is very generic. Every healthy person should be saying that. The question is, what kind of family? How will your family be different than another? What is unique to you that someone else doesn't have? So we have to go back to the initial point of departure, which is, of course, why are we here? Now, mission implies that you were sent on a mission. Not just implies, it means that. Vision means that there is a vision to your life, whether you know it or not, which also suggests that there is a direction, there is a purpose. So what is that purpose? So the mystics and the sages, scholars, discuss purpose of life in different ways. I'm going to go now into all the different explanations. There are 3 or 4 different reasons given. I'll go to the ultimate reason that is ultimately explained why we are here. First collectively, and then, of course, the key here is why you and I uniquely, you, not me, and each of us individually. Overall, the words of the Medrash are used. You can also look in Tanya chapter 36 if you want more elaboration, and it goes like this. That it's actually talking about the temple, when God tells Moses to build the temple. So there's the expression in 2 words, the mission of all of existence. In the chapter in Truma in the book of Exodus, V'asili Migdash, build for me a sanctuary, a holy place. Migdash means a Mokum Kaddish, a holy place. V'shachanti b'seicham. 2 words. I will dwell, I will rest among you. The shortest mission statement you'll ever hear. I will dwell among you. Shachanti b'seicham. It doesn't say I will dwell in it, in the structure, even though we're talking about a structure there. I will dwell among you. That's the purpose of our lives. A material world was put into place, and our souls were sent to this world to transform it, as the Medrash says, into a home, into a dwelling place, where the spirit is comfortable. Is the spirit comfortable in this material world? Right now it's not. Not collectively and not personally. There's tension between spirit and matter on every level. And that tension is the tension of your life. One way or another, anxiety, any form of it, is a tension between who you are and what you do, between your ultimate purpose and what you're busy with. There has to be a tension. There's the tension between the need to survive, our survival needs, and our more transcendental, called spiritual needs. Tension between the work and home, between your higher personal standards and the need to conform or compromise due to the marketplace or due to whatever. The tension between peer pressure, shaping you into something that maybe you're not so proud of, but you do because it's more comfortable. And for ultimately the tension between what we are as that inner child before we were trampled upon and before our psyches were bruised or wounded in one way or another by life. Which sadly in our generation we have to include dysfunctional homes, broken homes, absenteeism, the insecurity, and all the rest of the list of psychological warfare and the defense mechanisms that we have to build in order to contend with that. These are real forces in our lives that take up far more than we even imagine of our energy, our time, our space. So you can imagine, as I said earlier, with all that, plus all the details of your life, where's there room for vision? But this all demonstrates, this itself, if your life isn't working, it's actually the biggest sign that you are right smack in fulfilling the purpose of your existence, except you haven't fulfilled it yet. That is the tension between matter and spirit. And we all have it. The greatest Moses had it in his subtle way, and the most confused and aimless people in this world have it in a different extreme. And that is exactly why we were put here, to resolve that tension, to bridge the two worlds. The world of physics, you say that matter and energy today are reversible. E equals mc squared. But that's not just a physics, it's not just a mathematical and scientific formula. It's actually a personal formula as well. Matter equals energy, however, in our perception it doesn't. The material world is one universe, and another world is our spiritual universe. So who does not have a dichotomy in their lives? You know, a lot of talk, and I wrote about it a few weeks ago, about this Chil Hashem desecration of certain people alleged to do certain crimes, considered to be rabbis. And what I wrote about, which is obvious really, is all of us have this dissonance. However, it's obviously much more contrast. The contrast is so much more profound and therefore so much more disturbing when you see a so-called holy person behave in an unholy way. Whereas the rest of us are not so holy, so it's not so bad, so to speak. But it's same bad, it means there is inconsistency. Is anyone in this world not inconsistent? The whole world, idealism by definition means you're inconsistent. It wouldn't be an ideal if you were living right. So our dreams and aspirations and ideals are always more than what we do, which is in itself not the problem. Acknowledging it is half the cure, knowing there is a gap between what you want to be and what you are. Hopefully. Some people have come to a point of resignation where there isn't even that. But that's another problem. I don't know whether it's true or not. Henry Kissinger said that when Nixon resigned that night, after they prayed, so he saw Nixon go over to the big portrait of John F. Kennedy, and he heard him mutter to himself. He says, they love you because you are who they want to be. They hate me because I am who they are. And since JFK Camelot was also assassinated, it definitely deified it even more so. The JFK was caught in a Watergate had he lived. I don't know what it would have been, but that's another story. So yes, we do have a dichotomy, and the key thing to remember is that there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you are fighting it and not becoming part of the problem, but part of the solution. And the dichotomy was put in place by God Himself. You want a mystical terminology, you go to the words of the Arizal, the Tzimtzum. By concealing the divine presence from us, which in turn allowed us to be an independent reality with independent consciousness, there began the potential for all dissonance, for all dichotomies, for all inconsistencies. So you want to blame it on God? Yeah, but there's a purpose in that. Without God doing that, we would have no independent existence. We wouldn't be able to talk about it. So God did that. Our challenge is to reverse the process. So in a way, you could say we're even battling God's dynamics. But that's exactly the point. The Talmud even makes a statement where God smiles and says, my children have prevailed over me. What do you think happened on Yom Kippur or these days when Moses is up on the mountain and God does not want to forgive the people for building the golden calf, and Moses insists and prevails? We say, Salachti kidvarecha, the holiest day of the year. A human being prevailed over God. This is the relationship in Judaism between humans and God. There's a partnership here. God provides the resources and the challenges and the purpose. And it's for us to embrace it and actually reverse the process. And we have the power to do so, which makes us, in this essence, and these are not my own words, godlike. Because we have the power to reveal the divine that concealed Himself from us. That's a pretty big thing. It's one thing a human being conceals. The divine concealment, we have the power to battle. And that is the ultimate purpose, vision, and mission of a human being in your life. That's a heavy statement, but this is Judaism unequivocally stating why we're here. And that's why we're sent here, and everything else follows. So all the other things that you may have convinced yourself is your purpose, maybe is a subcategory in what I just described, or maybe a distraction. So the question now is, what are you doing in your life that is fulfilling this vision and mission? And here's where it gets more interesting, which comes down to our unique vision and mission. What I just said is collective. All of us. But here's where we are different. There are no two human beings alike in this world. Talmud says it. Ein deus ein shavis, no two perspectives that are alike, no two mindsets, no two faces, no two personalities, and no two souls that are alike. Why? Not just because diversity is nice, because you don't need two of the same. We don't need clones. In fulfilling a purpose for something, each of us has one particular role to play in fulfilling that purpose. So in a sense, we're like different musical notes in a large composition, with each note being indispensable. So that statement that you are indispensable, and how you bridge matter and spirit in your personal life, only you can do and no one else can do but you. And this requires an analysis of who you are now. What I've said till now, as I said, is overall for all the human race, entire human race. If you want to now get down to your personal vision statement, your behold, what is your bird's eye view, and not the details. So here, I want to discuss this at length, and I have it in writing. If any of you want to complement what I'm saying here, send us an email and I'll send it to you in a written form, but I'll just summarize it. That there are 4 things to look at. Okay, let's call it the POP, P-O-P-P. Personality, opportunities, people, and places. I'll describe what that means in a moment. These are 4 things, if you want to identify, like a signpost, where your vision, where your mission lies, you have to understand. Those are the 4 unique things that are to you, unique to you. Let's start with personality. As I said, every personality is different. And personality itself, obviously, is not just a one-line answer, what kind of personality. But, for instance, there are creative personalities, and there are more implementing personalities. There are idea people. In Kabbalistic, Hasidic terminology, they are chachma people. People who conceive of great ideas, but they don't know how to flesh it out, bring it down to action. And there are bina people, mevinim, chachamim and mevinim, if you want to put it. You say a maven. A maven is bina, someone who can embellish, who can flesh it out. And you'll find very few, if at all, are good at both, or excellent at both. There are great conceivers. And you'll see many companies have the great conceiving people, and there are people who are great at taking the concept and doing and developing it. There are people who excel, who are driven more intuitively and emotionally. Others are more cerebral, intellectual. And I'm talking now about personalities before they're affected by social factors, parents, and so on. Just even genetic, just very not that one is superior to the other. Different strengths. Each of us have a different combination. If you want to have it more specifically, if you want to have the so-called the mystic's diagnosis of your personality, the mystic would have to look at the configuration of your 10 spheres inside you, which is your Chachma Bina Das, Chesed Gvura Tiferes Netzach Chayid Yisod Malchus. Was that fast enough? In English, some of you be familiar, the structure of the human being is broken into, the conscious structure of a human being is broken into 3 cerebral forces, which is Chachma Bina Das, usually translated wisdom, understanding, knowledge, but it's concept, comprehension, and conclusion. And then there are the 7 emotions, which are love, discipline, compassion, endurance, humility, bonding, and dignity. I'm not going to go into details right now. If you have my Omer book there, it's elaborated upon. And it's just the point being that a personality in each of us have a different configuration of these 10. No one is alike. So we all have all 10 of them, but our strengths are not in all 10. And then how they interact with each other are different. So if you really want a personality analysis, you really need to go into those 10 and figure out how they interplay with each other. As I said, we all have them all, but our strengths are different. Some of them are underdeveloped. We may even have some that we have strengths in, but we haven't actualized them, and so on. So understanding your personality is critical. You know why? Because God did not send down the soul to earth with a little box that said, here's my mission. It would have been maybe nice to come out of your mother's womb with a little package that said, this is the mission of this particular soul. It didn't work that way. So how do we figure it out? We look at it, we have to study ourselves. Why do you have this personality and I have a different personality? Because your mission requires that personality as opposed to mine. In other words, you're given what you need, the tools that you need, the resources to fulfill why you're here. So your personality can teach tremendous volumes about what your vision particular one is. If you have, for instance, very strong emotional strengths, emotional wisdom, intelligence, that should not be ignored. That means that's something that you must use in your time on this earth, in fulfilling the purpose of your life. So that's personality. The other three, OPP, are also signs that also teach us who we are. The next, opportunities. No two of us on this earth have the same opportunities. That has a lot to do with, obviously, your family connections, or who you bumped into in your life. Different people have different opportunities, and they are infinitely apart. That too gives you direction. Why do you have this opportunity? Because it was given to you to fulfill that mission, to discover your vision. And then the next final two are people and places. The people are the people you know. The people you know were sent to you for the same reason, to help you find that direction. And finally, the places you've traveled to, where you were born, where you grew up, where you went to school, and where you traveled to, even on vacation. And each of us has our own trajectory and our own destinations that we were at. God leads the footsteps of a human being. The fact that you are in these places means that you have opportunities there to excavate. So if you do an analysis of these four things, trust me, you'll see a life completely different than you've ever imagined. This is the beginning of starting to emerge a vision. Because you step back, it forces you to step back, because all these four are not about details. Notice not one of them has anything to do with your business card or what you do. It may fit in there somewhere, because what you do is also part of your opportunities, the people you know, and so on. But if you really want to understand your life in the context, that bird's eye view, like the forest from the trees, these four things are critical. Because you'll discover, and of course this can also be some frustration, there are many things we had dreams of when we were teenagers that we would do. There are people that have very strong musical skills, other creative skills, and they never panned out. You were never able to find the time or the people that would believe in you enough to pay you for it. So it remains a so-called sore spot of an unrealized dream, unrealized talent. Now you could just get stuck there and stay there. We all have something like that, certain dreams, aspirations that were not fulfilled for one reason or another. But that too is part of your life, and that too is an opportunity to look at. Why was it not realized? What did that teach you? And what can you do about it now? Nothing is ever lost, as long as you don't remain stuck under the details of your life. Because if you're stuck under the rubble, then there's no way out. Vision can only come when you rise and you look up and you're able to look beyond, see the bigger picture. And this is not just an esoteric and nice a workshop concept, vision versus details, etc. This is really a story of life and death, to be very honest. Will you live up to why you were sent on this earth? Or you will not, which I don't even want to mention that option. And time, the clock ticks. So it's not like it's optional. So you could say, let's play devil's advocate. Not that Jews believe in a devil, but you get the idea. Okay, so who cares if I don't? I'll live my life. I'm 40, 50, 60, 70. I'll be 80 years old. And I have no vision. And this is not a theoretical thing. I know someone, who's a relative of a relative, who has enough money to retire and is retired down south. And he plays golf every day. And it's exactly the words he said to me. He's an intelligent guy, so he read or he heard something I said. In a similar vein that I'm discussing this evening. And he said, so I don't have a vision. Playing golf, very happy. You want to know what I answered? I didn't answer. I smiled. And I asked him for a donation. I'm just kidding. That's what I should have done. Because it's not a matter of debate. I'm not going to debate with an 80-year-old experienced person who has so much vast more knowledge than I have and so on. And it's not about debate. It's not about who's going to win. I felt terrible. I felt sad for this person. Because the second half of the day is watching television. Now, I don't blame him. I know where he comes from. I know where he grew up. And this is what he was taught. He never knew there was a purpose. The sad part is that he's not alone in this world. The question is, where are we going to be? Not when we're 80, where we are now. We don't have to wait till then. Now, does this person do nothing good in his life? I'm not going to say that. God forbid. I'm not judging. He may have done a lot more than I've done. But how much more could he have done had he known he had a vision and committed to it? In this case, it happens to be his children don't talk to him, and his grandchildren also don't talk to him. So clearly, it's more than just some theoretical thing. He had no vision. Had he had a vision, it would have been different. Yes, absolutely, because money would not have been a factor, and other sideshows wouldn't have been the factor. So this is just some type of innocent, innocuous golf player. But I could see a person who maybe grew up and built a healthy family, and can't really articulate what vision they had. A loving person, supported his family, brought up good children, gave them a good Jewish education, or good education in general. I'm not suggesting it's not possible, but the odds are against it, let me tell you, in this world that we live, maybe in all worlds. It's like saying a business without a mission statement that managed. Yeah, you could probably find one or two. Because instinctively the owner knew what direction he's going. So he maybe didn't articulate it, but he had some instinct. I'm just stating this for the record in case you're trying to wiggle out and want to find a reason not to have a vision or mission statement. So I'm just making it like a little easier. You shouldn't go away with complete guilt if you need that, okay? Jonathan? Okay. We always have to have a back door out, right? But to get beyond this covering all the bases here, the bottom line is the following. Your life will dramatically and radically be different if it's driven by vision and if it's not. Simple as that. It's the rule of existence. It works everywhere in life, but the least place it's applied to is in our personal lives. That's the sad tragedy, in a way. So we have a chapter that wakes us up to that fact. And it all begins, as I said now, where we are right now, and our willpower. So how do you begin practically? Okay, let's say you even list all these POPP, personality, opportunities, people, places, and you have a mentor or someone you can talk to that can help you review it. It still doesn't mean you suddenly can change your life. So it comes down to small little things that are big things that we do. Shifts, small shifts. I always recommend these two exercises because they're so easy to do. I never really followed up how many people actually listened and did it, but that's another story. But they're hard to do simply because they're not our habit. But you do it, it's the first key steps to this whole process. In business, you either have daily meetings, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, keeping things focused toward the mission. So in tradition, Jewish tradition, we have a daily meeting as well with yourself. And that is, as soon as you wake up in the morning, there's a tradition to say, Modani. It's a one-line prayer that simply says, I acknowledge to you for returning my soul to me with compassion, with abundant compassion. Just that statement. Instead, we say it with our children. Many people say it mechanically. But if you say it every morning, and I'm suggesting say it every morning, before you do anything else, as soon as you wake up, as soon as you're conscious that you're awake, the statement is an unbelievable meditation that could take a minute, or you can spend 5 minutes if you like, or more. But a minute is not more than a minute is not even necessary. It's essentially saying, I am fundamentally a soul, and my life and contract has been renewed this morning, and I thank you for returning my soul to me, which really means thank you for giving me my mission and giving me another day to fulfill it. It's putting focus not on the spokes of your life, but on the hub. That there's a center, that there's a mission, there's a vision. And the vision is your soul has something to accomplish in this world. You're not a body that is looking for spiritual experiences. You're a soul that's utilizing the tools of the material world to fulfill the spiritual vision and mission of your life. So a completely different way to look at it. But how do we train ourselves to look at that way when we, for 20, 30 years, more years, looked at it differently? You have to begin somewhere. So the Modani is simply an exercise which its power lies not in doing it once, in doing it every day. And after a while, the truths of it begin to emerge. It'll suddenly become more real to you that you are a soul. Remember, the way we see ourselves, we are bodies. And from time to time, or from more than time to time, we have this soul experience. How do I know this? Well, I speak for myself. What do you feel most visibly and most tangibly? Physical needs. When you're hungry, you feel you're hungry. When you're thirsty, you're tired. Other needs. Spiritual needs, you can ignore for a day, for a week, for a month, and so on. You don't eat for a day, you're going to know. Your body will tell you. So that alone tells you that spirituality is more elusive. That means that even a spiritual human being you are in this world, as I said before, no matter how many reminders you have, it's not enough. So the key thing is is introduce into your life reminders, signposts. And I don't just mean refrigerator magnets and bumper stickers. Not that it could hurt. So the first thing is a modani. It's a short prayer, a short statement. And personalize it. Don't talk about it generically. It's not someone else's prayer, it's yours. And every day it can mean something else. But it all means, but ultimately it's all one statement. That I have a soul, and that is the driving engine in my life, even though I don't necessarily feel it all the time. It's acknowledging that. And the second is at the end of the day, that before you go to sleep, don't fall asleep with the television on, or the newspaper on your nose, or with anything that is an extension of the day that you live. Go to sleep with something fresh. A new poem, a prayer, something spiritual that touches you, song, anything that's different from the day. Because then you enter into those mysterious hours of sleep in a completely different way, and your sleep also becomes a part of your healing, as opposed to going to sleep with the worries of the day. So waking up in the morning, punctuated, these two bookends. Upon awaking the modani, upon going to sleep. There's also a prayer, B'yotcha kidruchi, similar one. In your hands, in your arms, I entrust my spirit. You could do that as well. The point is that these two moments, significant moments, are rebirth every morning, and are going to sleep every evening, are filled, just those moments, with something that is higher than the rest of your life. You'll see it begins to grow on you, and begins to become a dominant force, and will begin to demand more time, actually, which is, of course, good. These two exercises, anyone can do. There's no excuse. You could be as busy as you are, you can do it. You just have to want to do it. And you tell me what impact it will have. Do it day after day. Day after day. The challenge will be not the difficulty doing it, as I said, simply the habit. You're not used to it. So that's going to take a little while to get used to it. But once you get used to it, it's very easy to do. It's not disturbing. It's not difficult. It doesn't make you perspire. Maybe it should, but initially it won't. And the power, the dividends and the return is enormous. And then you'll start seeing that this will begin to help you connect other dots of your day. This is where we start connecting the vision with the details. You interact with people with a little more sensitivity. Here's a businessman who was known for a cutthroat businessman. I met him, came to this class a few years ago. And he told me an interesting thing. A lot of success. For some reason, I don't know why, he decided, I guess he read my book, Toward a Meaningful Life. They decided to have a case of books in his office, Madison Avenue. And at the end of every meeting, because I wrote in one of the chapters there a suggestion to have a charity box on his desk, on a business, if you're in business. So you'd have this charity box, you'd give everybody at these meetings, these high-level meetings, a book, and have everyone put in some money in the charity box. So first everyone thought he went a little off his mind, but they saw that his business tactics didn't change, so they realized he's still the same. But with time, actually, it changed, he said, dramatically his life and the life of his whole business and everything. It in a way, he said, it really tamed, what were the words he used? He said it like softened a connection. He said, I never knew. And here I've been having business meetings, all kinds of contracts, agreements, and so on. And it created a personal connection. He says, I have relationships with people that I would never have had. And our business relationship is even much more profound because there's a whole other level of trust. Now, he didn't do it with that in mind. He did it because he felt it was a healthy, good thing to do. See, these are examples, what happens. What happens is the life doesn't necessarily turn upside down. What you are doing suddenly is informed by a higher vision. It's a whole different dimension. So we're not talking about escaping somewhere. It's who you are and what you do, but suddenly, instead of it just being this, a bunch of details, there's some higher script that is beginning to emerge. And this is consistent to the story of anyone that moves from so-called the world of matter to the world of spirit. It does not mean moving into a yeshiva or a kollel or leaving your job. Some people, they feel that they can do that and they want to do that. Fine, for a short period of time. It means something much more profound. It means going back exactly where you were and now filling your mission. When someone tells me, a guy came here years ago to the class from the music business, music publishing. And he asked me one day after the class, he says, so what are you expecting? What's the next thing? Because he was being inspired. He says, am I going to wear a black coat and wear a long beard and move to Crown Heights? So I said to him, Ronnie is his name. I said, Ronnie, if you do that, I'll never speak to you again in my life. Absolutely not. You have to go back to your music publishing world and bring whatever you've learned there. That's your mission. There are no people in Crown Heights without you. Meaning, the point is, the mission of your life is where your personality and your opportunities and your people and places are, not mine and not someone else's. That's where God wanted you to be. The challenge is to elevate it, to transform it. If you need sometimes people need a hiatus, a type of injection, so you go, like we all go on vacation to get recharged. But that's just a recharge to be able to re-enter. That's what Shabbos is about. Why do you think there's 6 days of the week, work days, and 1 weekday Shabbos? Like someone asked me, Shabbos is so beautiful, you should have 6 days Shabbos and 1 work day. But you know something? There's a mitzvah that says, just like there's a mitzvah to keep Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to work 6 days of the week. Yeah, it's also a mitzvah. To work. Sifri says that. Why? Because the purpose of existence is not Shabbos. If God wanted us to have Shabbos, He wouldn't send souls down to earth altogether. In heaven, it's only Shabbos all the time. Not technically, but I mean to say it's only spiritual all the time. The whole purpose of life is immersion in this world. And once a week you get to so-called recharge your batteries, but the purpose is transformation, not insulation, not escapism, not asceticism, all the other isms that you like. So with that being said, so much more can be said about this topic. The chapter's title is Behold. And the first statement, behold it personally. Re'eh is individual, not plural. The Torah, interestingly, beginning with the 10 Commandments, is not spoken in the plural. There are places it is spoken in the plural, but in Hebrew, when you speak to a group, you say lochem, shalom aleichem. When you speak to an individual, you say lacha, to a male, loch, to a woman, to a female. The 10 Commandments, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, is spoken in the singular, as if God was speaking to one person. But there were millions of people standing there. It should have said, Anochi Hashem Elokeichem, Kabed es avichem, Lo signavu, Lo sirtzachu. These are the plural in Hebrew. In English, you can be a plural, a group or an individual, but in Hebrew, there's a different word used for you when you speak to an individual and you as a group. And the Medrash answers a fascinating answer. Long before the birth of individuality in the modern world, that Judaism is fiercely independent and individualistic. Each person standing at Sinai heard as only God was speaking to him or to her, and if no one else was there. Maybe the same words, but they heard music that was relevant to them. So when we hear the word Re'eh, behold, it's your behold, as opposed to someone else's. Behold the vision of your life. What does it look like? What should it look like? What could it look like? That's a question each of us must answer. You may not be able to answer it in a moment, but you can begin the process, and that's already the beginning of an answer. That means to be able to step back and say, why am I here? What should my life look like? If I used all my skills that God gave me for the right purpose, what would I be doing? What impact would I be having? And as I said, each of us have our own individual personality, skills, opportunities, and so on. So the answer is different for every person. It may not be easy to answer on your own, but with the help of a good friend, someone objective can see sometimes things we don't always see. It's not that difficult to discover if you set your mind to it. So armed with a little modani in the morning and a short prayer in the evening, with a little spirituality different parts of the day, you can see a vision will emerge. And you'll be able to say, behold, I see something more than I've seen till now. So may we all be blessed with the most important, the fortitude, to stick with it, with the regimen. That's the key. Because, as I said before, inspiration, to wake us up to it, that's not so difficult to inspire somebody. The challenge is maintenance. Maintenance contract is a lot more expensive. Much more difficult to keep it going. So, please see me, Meaningful Life Center, Velvel, who's sitting there, charming Velvel, and the Golden Malka, and all of us, and all of you actually, because in a way we're all a community, a family, I guess. And we are here to help each other. We all can lift each other up. As I said, we're all musical notes that complement each other. And if we see it that way, that's another way of also recognizing the vision. So it's a way of looking at each other in that fashion. I look at this room here, you can see a bunch of bodies sitting in chairs. And each of us has, I'm sure, our life has plenty of baggage and plenty of challenges. But it's also individual souls sitting together. And each of us has a spiritual destiny and journey. And we've intersected here this evening to try to recognize a higher pattern and script to our lives. That's the challenge. And that's something that's not difficult to hold on to if you hang out with people who see things that way. Because then it reinforces and it gives you the strength to be able to overcome the distractions or the other things that pull us down. The gravitational pull of Earth, where, as I began, the more things change, the more they stay the same. A generation comes, a generation goes, and nothing new under the sun. But above the sun, in the world of spirit, which we all have access to, is constant newness, and it's constantly fresh. So I want to thank you for the freshness you bring to my life, and I hope I can reciprocate. Thank you. Before you get, let me just, the class is dedicated in loving memory of a good friend of mine's father who passed away a few weeks ago, Rahil Pevsner, 14th of Tammuz, dedicated by his son Fivish Pevsner family, and also a refuah shlema to Shlomo Zev ben Yonah Farfel. And there's another name? That's, Oh. And that's, do I say who's doing it? So, and everyone else who may need a refuah shlema. Healing is also a matter of bridging spirit and matter. Sorry. I said, yeah. What? What's the name? Oh, she needs a refuah shlema. And also Ellen, our good friend Ellen Almal also, as well as a refuah shlema. Thank you. And any other announcements to be made? Want to say?
Yeah. Okay, this coming Monday, we're going to have a film, Out of the Fog, by one of our members of the MLC. Maya Batash is right here. And we'll see her on
What
Monday
time?
at 8:15, right here. There'll be popcorn
sign
and
up.
soda.
Popcorn.
Popcorn and soda, and you'll be able to watch a wonderful film. You can go, the flyers on the table, you can check it out. Also, our good old friend Philip will give a class tomorrow night at 7:15. Has a show that is being playing in the theater. I don't know exactly all the information. It's on a card over here. A few days in a row. It's The Secret of Our Souls, Kabbalistic love story based on the Baal Shem Tov. Strongly suggest you go see it.
There are cards out there?
Yeah, there's cards out there, and also on the table there's cards.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. We will be back here next Wednesday.